My name is Morgan, and I'm 33 years old. For the last 11 years, I've worn the uniform. 11 years of dusty bases, cramped barracks, deployment after deployment, and too many goodbyes to count. The army became my life, my identity, my purpose. And somewhere along the way, home became something distant, a place I thought about late at night when the desert wind howled outside my tent. Or when I was trying to fall asleep in some godforsaken outpost halfway across the world. But this Christmas, I was finally going home. It had been 4 years since I'd set foot in North Carolina. 4 years since I'd seen my dad's face in person, smelled my childhood kitchen, or felt the weight of a real winter, the kind with bare trees and cold mornings and that specific quiet that settles over everything when snow might fall. I'd been stationed in Germany for 2 years, then Korea, then back to Texas for training rotations. Phone calls replaced visits. Texts replaced conversations. And somehow, without me realizing it, I became a stranger to the people who raised me, Dad, and I talked every few weeks. The calls were short. He'd ask how I was doing. I'd say fine. He'd tell me about his job at the plant, the weather, the neighbors. I'd listen and nod even though he couldn't see me. Then we'd say we loved each other and hang up. It was mechanical, safe. Neither of us ever said what we were really thinking. But this year was supposed to be different. I had 3 weeks of leave, 3 full weeks to spend at home in the small town I grew up in, Millbrook, North Carolina, population barely 4,000. I could already picture it. Dad's old 2-story house with the wraparound porch, the oak tree out front that I used to climb as a kid, the smell of coffee brewing early in the morning. I imagined us sitting at the kitchen table like we used to, talking about everything and nothing. I imagined fixing whatever needed fixing around the house. Maybe we'd drive out to the lake. Maybe we'd go to church on Christmas Eve like we always did when Mom was alive. Mom died when I was 21. Breast cancer. She fought it hard for 2 years, and then one morning in April, she was gone. Dad and I were wrecked. Completely wrecked. I enlisted 6 months later. I told myself it was about serving my country, about finding purpose, about making her proud. And maybe that was part of it. But the truth? I was running. I couldn't stay in that house. Couldn't look at her empty chair. Couldn't watch my dad try to hold it together when I knew he was falling apart. So I left. And I kept leaving. I sent him pictures from overseas. I called on his birthday. I told him I was fine. Always fine. But I wasn't there. Not when he needed me. Not when the house got too quiet. Not when he learned to cook for one, or when he had to figure out how to do his own laundry, or when he sat alone on Christmas morning for the first time in his life. This year, I was going to make up for it. I was going to be there. I bought my plane ticket in September, booked my leave request, started counting down the days. I even bought him a gift, a nice leather wallet with his initials engraved on it. Something simple but meaningful. I wanted him to know I was thinking about him, that I cared, that I was finally coming home. Then 3 days before my flight, I got the message. I was sitting in my barracks room at Fort Hood, packing my duffel bag. My roommate had already left for the holidays. The room was quiet except for the hum of the heater and the sound of my phone buzzing on the desk. I glanced over and saw Dad's name on the screen. A text message. My stomach tightened. Dad never texted. He hated texting. He always called, even if it was just to say something quick. I picked up the phone. The message was short. 13 words. Morgan, don't come home for Christmas. I'll explain later. I'm sorry. I stared at the screen. Read it again. Then again. My hands started shaking. My chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped a band around my ribs and was pulling it tighter and tighter. I tried to call him. No answer. I called again. Straight to voicemail. I sent a text back. Dad, what's going on? Are you okay? Please call me. Nothing. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in my hand, heart pounding. My mind was racing. 1,000 scenarios flooded my head, each one worse than the last. Was he sick? Was he hurt? Had something happened? Was he in trouble? Did someone die? Did he die and someone else send the message? I called my Aunt Linda, Dad's older sister. She lived 2 towns over. If something was wrong, she'd know. Morgan? Her voice was warm, surprised. Honey, I wasn't expecting to hear from you. Is Dad okay? I asked, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. There was a pause. A long pause. Too long. He's fine, sweetheart. Why? What happened? He just told me not to come home for Christmas. He won't answer my calls. Linda, what the hell is going on? Another pause. I could hear her breathing. Then quietly, Morgan, I think you need to talk to your dad. I'm trying. He's not answering. Then maybe you should respect his wishes. Respect his what? Linda, I haven't been home in for years. I have leave. I bought a ticket. I was supposed to. I know, honey. I know. But sometimes things are more complicated than they seem. What does that mean? It means your dad loves you. And maybe he has his reasons. I wanted to scream. I wanted to reach through the phone and shake her until she told me what she knew. But instead, I just said, fine, tell him to call me. I will. She didn't. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on my bed in the dark, staring at my phone, waiting for it to ring. It didn't. I replayed every conversation I'd had with Dad over the last few months. Was there something I missed? Some sign? He'd seemed fine. Tired, maybe, but fine. He never said anything was wrong. He never said he didn't want me to come home, but he also never asked me to come home. Not once. Not in for years. I thought about going anyway, showing up at the house, knocking on the door, demanding answers. But something stopped me. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was fear. Or maybe it was the voice in my head, Mom's voice telling me to be patient, to trust him. So I waited. The next day, I tried calling again. No answer. I sent another text. Nothing. I called Linda again. She didn't pick up. I felt like I was losing my mind. My leave was starting in 2 days. My flight was in 2 days. And my dad, the man I'd been planning to spend Christmas with, the man I hadn't seen in for years, didn't want me there. On the second day, I got another message. This time, it was longer. Morgan, I know you're upset. I know you don't understand. But I need you to trust me. Please don't come home. Not yet. I'll call you after Christmas. I promise. I love you. Dad. I read it over and over until the words blurred. My eyes burned. My throat felt thick. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. I hadn't cried in years. Not since Mom's funeral. I'd learned to swallow it down, to lock it away, to keep moving. That's what soldiers do. We keep moving. But right then, sitting alone in that barracks room with my packed duffel bag at my feet and a plane ticket I wouldn't use, I felt like I was breaking. Drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. I didn't go home for Christmas. I stayed at Fort Hood. Most of the base was empty. Everyone had gone home to their families. The chow hall was open but nearly deserted. I spent Christmas Eve in my room, eating takeout and watching old movies on my laptop. I tried not to think about Dad. Tried not to imagine him sitting in that house alone, the tree unlit, the stockings empty, the silence pressing down on him like a weight. On Christmas morning, I woke up to a voicemail. It was from Linda. Morgan, honey, I think you should come home. Not today, but soon. Your dad, he needs you. I can't explain over the phone, but please, come home. I booked a flight for the day after Christmas. The flight from Texas to North Carolina felt endless. I couldn't sit still. My leg bounced the entire time. My mind was spinning. By the time the plane landed in Raleigh, I felt like I'd been awake for days. I rented a car and drove the hour and a half to Millbrook, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. It was late afternoon when I pulled onto our street. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the yards. Everything looked the same. The same houses, the same mailboxes, the same quiet. But it felt different. Wrong. I parked in the driveway and sat there for a minute, staring at the house. The porch light was on. Dad's truck was in the driveway. The curtains were drawn. I took a deep breath, grabbed my bag, and walked to the front door. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Harder this time. Still nothing. I tried the handle. It was unlocked. I pushed the door open slowly. Dad? The house was dark, quiet. The air smelled stale, like the windows hadn't been opened in weeks. I stepped inside, my boots heavy on the hardwood floor. Dad, it's me. It's Morgan. I walked through the living room. The Christmas tree was up, but it wasn't decorated. Just bare branches in the corner, a box of ornaments sitting unopened beside it. The furniture looked the same, but everything felt off, like someone had been living here but not really living. I walked into the kitchen. Dishes piled in the sink. Empty beer bottles on the counter. A stack of unopened mail on the table. Dad? Then I heard it. A voice. Soft. Coming from upstairs. Morgan? I froze. It wasn't Dad's voice. I stood at the bottom of the stairs. Every muscle in my body locked. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The voice came again, softer this time, almost hesitant. Morgan? Is that you? It was a woman's voice. Older, gentle. I forced myself to move, my boots creaking on each step as I climbed. The upstairs hallway was dim, lit only by the fading daylight coming through the window at the far end. My parents' bedroom door was open. I could see the edge of the bed, the old quilt my mom used to love, the dresser with Dad's watch and wallet sitting on top. And then I saw her. She was standing in the doorway of the guest room, the room that used to be mine. She was probably in her early 60s, with short silver hair and soft, tired eyes. She wore a cardigan and jeans, and she was holding a laundry basket against her hip like she'd just been folding clothes. She looked at me like she'd seen a ghost. You came, she said quietly. Who are you? My voice came out harder than I meant it to. I felt like an intruder in my own house. Where's my dad? She set the basket down carefully. Your dad's at work. He'll be home soon. I asked who you are. She hesitated, then gave a small, sad smile. My name's Diane. I'm living here. Living here. I repeated, like the words didn't make sense. Why? Diane folded her arms across her chest, not defensively, but like she was trying to hold herself together. Your dad didn't tell you. Tell me what? She sighed. Maybe you should sit down. I don't want to sit down. I want to know what the hell is going on. Morgan, is this why he told me not to come? Because you're here. Diane's face crumpled a little. She nodded. He didn't want you to find out like this. He wanted to tell you himself, but he didn't know how. Tell me what? She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see the weight of something heavy in her eyes. Finally, she said, your father and I have been seeing each other for about a year. I moved in 6 months ago. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I actually took a step back. My brain felt sluggish, like it couldn't process what she'd just said. Seeing each other. Moved in. A year. You're dating my dad? She nodded. And you live here? In this house? In my mom's house? Morgan, don't. I snapped. My hands were shaking again. Don't say my name like you know me. I'm sorry, Diane said, and her voice cracked. I know this is a shock. A shock? I laughed, but it didn't sound like me. It sounded bitter, cold. Yeah, you could say that. I turned and walked back downstairs before I said something I'd regret. My chest felt tight, my breath coming too fast. I stood in the middle of the living room, looking around like I was seeing it all for the first time. This house, this place I grew up in, the place where Mom made pancakes every Sunday morning, where Dad taught me how to tie my shoes, where we sat together the night before her funeral and didn't say a word because there was nothing left to say. And now there was a stranger living here. I heard footsteps behind me. Diane came down slowly, her hands clasped in front of her like she was trying to decide whether to speak or stay quiet. Morgan, she said gently, I know this isn't what you expected. And I know it's not fair. But your dad, he's a good man. He's been so lonely. And he didn't want to hurt you. I turned to face her. Then why didn't he tell me? He tried. A few times. But every time he started to, he'd stop. He said you had enough on your plate, that you were halfway around the world, risking your life, and he didn't want to add more weight to your shoulders, so he just didn't tell me? He was going to. He was planning to tell you when you came home for Christmas. But then he panicked. He thought you'd hate him, or hate me, or both. I don't hate him, I said, and I realized it was true. I was angry. I was hurt. But I didn't hate him. I just wish he'd told me. Diane nodded. He wishes that too, We stood there in silence for a moment. Then Diane said, "He talks about you all the time. Every day. He's so proud of you, Morgan. He keeps every letter you've ever sent him. He watches the news every night, looking for anything about where you're stationed. He prays for you. He worries about you. And he misses you so much it breaks my heart." I felt something crack inside me. My throat tightened. My eyes stung. I turned away so she wouldn't see. "I didn't replace your mother," Diane said softly. "No one could. But I love your father, and I want you to know that. I'm not here to take anything from you. I'm just here." I didn't know what to say. I couldn't look at her, so I just nodded. "He'll be home soon," Diane said. "If you want to wait." "I'll wait." Dad came home an hour later. I heard his truck pull into the driveway, heard the engine cut off, heard his boots on the porch. The front door opened, and there he was. He looked older, thinner. His hair was almost entirely gray now, and there were new lines around his eyes. He was wearing his work jacket and carrying a thermos. When he saw me standing in the living room, he stopped. His face went pale. "Morgan." "Hey, Dad." For a second, neither of us moved. Then he set the thermos down, crossed the room, and pulled me into a hug. He held on tight, tighter than he'd ever held me before. I felt his shoulders shake. He was crying. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." I hugged him back, and I felt my own tears start to fall. "It's okay, Dad. It's not okay. I should have told you. I should have been honest. Why didn't you?" He pulled back, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "Because I was scared. I was scared you'd think I'd forgotten about your mom, or that I'd moved on too fast, or that I didn't care. I don't think that. I loved your mother," he said, his voice breaking. "I still love her. I always will. But Morgan, I was so lonely. For years, I was so damn lonely." And Diane, she helped me remember what it felt like to not be alone. I nodded. I understood. I hated that I understood. But I did. "I don't want to lose you," Dad said. "You're all I've got. You're not going to lose me." He looked at me, his eyes red and tired. "Are you staying?" I thought about it. About the anger I'd felt. About the shock. About the way this house felt different now, like it belonged to someone else. But I also thought about my dad, standing in front of me, looking smaller and older and more fragile than I'd ever seen him. "Yeah," I said. "I'm staying." The next few days were strange, awkward. Diane kept her distance, giving Dad and me space to talk. We sat at the kitchen table for hours, catching up on the last for years. He told me about his job, about the guys at the plant, about the garden he'd started in the backyard. I told him about Germany, about Korea, about the long nights and the hard days and the things I couldn't quite put into words. We didn't talk about Mom much, but she was there in the pauses, in the way we looked at her picture on the mantel, in the way we both still set the table for three out of habit. Diane stayed quiet, moving through the house like a shadow. She cooked dinner one night, pot roast and mashed potatoes, and I had to admit it was good. Not as good as Mom's, but good. She asked me about my service, about where I'd been, about what I wanted to do next. She listened. She didn't try to fill the silence. And slowly, I started to see why Dad loved her. On New Year's Eve, the three of us sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching fireworks light up the sky over the lake. Dad was in the middle, one arm around Diane, one hand resting on my shoulder. It was cold, and the air smelled like smoke in winter. And for the first time in 4 years, I felt like I was home. "I'm glad you came," Dad said quietly. "Me too." Diane looked over at me. "Will you come back? For visits, I mean?" "Yeah," I said. "I will." And I meant it. 2 weeks later, I was back on base. Back in uniform. Back to the routine. But something had shifted. I called Dad every few days now. The conversations were longer, easier. He told me about Diane's daughter, who was coming to visit in the spring. He told me about the new truck he was thinking about buying. He told me he was happy. And I believed him. I thought about Mom a lot during those weeks. About what she would have wanted for Dad. And I realized she wouldn't have wanted him to be alone. She would have wanted him to live, to laugh, to love again. She would have wanted him to be happy. So I let go of the anger. I let go of the hurt. And I started to make peace with the idea that home wasn't the same place it used to be. But that didn't mean it wasn't still home. In March, I got orders for another deployment. Before I left, I flew back to North Carolina. Diane picked me up from the airport. We drove to the house in comfortable silence, and when we got there, Dad was waiting on the porch. We spent the weekend together, the three of us. We went to the lake. We ate dinner at the old diner in town. We watched movies on the couch. And on my last night, Dad and I sat on the porch again. Just the two of us. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I know. And your mom would be too." I nodded, my throat tight. "Be safe over there." "I will." He hugged me. Long and hard. "Come home when you can." "I will," I said again. "I promise." And this time, I knew I would keep it. The revenge wasn't loud or violent or dramatic. It wasn't about punishing my dad or making him suffer. The revenge was quieter than that. It was choosing forgiveness when I could have chosen bitterness. It was letting him live his life when I could have made him feel guilty for moving on. It was refusing to let my anger steal the time we had left, because the real enemy wasn't Diane. It wasn't my dad. It was time and distance. And all the years I'd spent running, the revenge was coming home. And staying. The deployment was supposed to be 6 months. It turned into 8, then 10. We were in a remote part of Afghanistan, doing training operations with local forces, and every time we thought we were done, something would happen that would extend our stay. Another mission, another delay, another month away from home. I kept my promise though. I called Dad every week, sometimes twice a week. The calls were different now, real. We talked about things that mattered. He told me about his day, about Diane's cooking experiments, about the neighbor's dog that kept digging up his tomato plants. I told him about the landscape, about the people I was working with, about the small victories and the hard days, and for the first time in 11 years, I didn't feel like I was hiding. Diane was usually in the background during our calls. Sometimes she'd wave at the camera, sometimes she'd shout hello, and sometimes when Dad stepped away to grab something, she'd lean in and ask how I was really doing. Not the soldier answer, the real answer. "I'm okay." I told her once, and I meant it. "Your dad misses you," she said. "He counts the days until you come home." "I miss him too. He's planning a big dinner for when you get back. He wants to make your mom's pot roast." Something caught in my chest. He remembers how to make it. He has the recipe card. He keeps it in his wallet. I had to turn away from the camera for a second. When I looked back, Diane was smiling softly. "You're good for him," I said. "He's good for me too," she replied. "And Morgan? I'm glad you came home that day, even though it was hard." "Me too." I came home in July. The heat in North Carolina was thick and sticky, the kind that makes your clothes cling to your skin the moment you step outside. But I didn't care. I was home. Dad and Diane picked me up from the airport. Dad looked healthier than he had in December. He'd put on a little weight, and there was color in his cheeks. Diane was wearing a sundress and sandals, and she smiled when she saw me coming through the gate. "Welcome home, soldier," Dad said, pulling me into a hug. "It's good to be back." Diane hugged me too, quick and gentle. "We made up your room." "Well, the guest room. Your old room is." We turned it into an office. "I hope that's okay." "It's fine," I said. And it was. The house wasn't a museum. It was a home. It was supposed to change. We drove back to Millbrook with the windows down, the warm air rushing through the car. Dad pointed out all the things that had changed since I'd been gone: the new gas station on the corner, the restaurant that had closed, the family that had just moved in down the street. Diane sat in the back with me, asking about the flight, about whether I was hungry, about how long I could stay. 3 weeks, I said. 3 weeks, Dad repeated, grinning. That's plenty of time. The first few days were slow and easy. I slept in late. I sat on the porch with coffee in the mornings. I helped Dad in the garden, pulling weeds and picking tomatoes. Diane taught me how to make her banana bread, and we laughed when I burned the first batch. One afternoon, while Dad was at the hardware store, Diane and I sat at the kitchen table, shelling peas from the garden. It was quiet work, meditative, and for a while neither of us said anything. Then Diane spoke. Can I ask you something? Sure. What made you forgive him? And me? I looked up at her. She wasn't looking at me. She was focused on the peas, her fingers working steadily. I don't know if I had a choice, I said. I could have stayed angry. I could have made him feel guilty. But what would that have done? It wouldn't have brought my mom back. It wouldn't have changed anything. And honestly, I was tired of being angry. Diane nodded slowly. I think about your mom sometimes, about what she'd think of me. I think she'd like you, I said, and I realized I meant it. She always wanted Dad to be happy, and you make him happy. Diane's eyes filled with tears. She wiped them quickly with the back of her hand. Thank you for saying that. It's true. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're a good daughter, Morgan. He's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have him. That night, Dad made Mom's pot roast. He pulled out the old recipe card, yellowed and stained, the handwriting faded but still readable. He moved around the kitchen with the kind of focus I remembered from when I was a kid. When he'd help Mom cook Sunday dinners, Diane offered to help, but he waved her off. This one's on me, he said. I sat at the table watching him peel carrots and chop onions and season the meat just the way the card said. And I realized that this wasn't about replacing Mom. This was about remembering her, honoring her, keeping her close in the only way he knew how. When the roast was done, we sat down together, the three of us. Dad said grace, his voice steady and warm. We ate, and the food tasted just like I remembered, just like home. This is perfect, Dad, I said. He smiled. Your mom would be proud. She would, I agreed. After dinner, we sat on the porch and watched the fireflies dance in the yard. Dad told stories about when I was little, about the time I tried to catch a frog and fell in the creek, about the Halloween I dressed up as a soldier for the first time, about the night before I shipped out for basic training when he couldn't sleep. I was so scared, he admitted. I didn't want to lose you too. You didn't lose me, I said. I know, but I was scared I would. Diane rested her head on his shoulder. I sat on the porch swing, rocking gently, listening to the crickets and the distant sound of someone's radio playing down the street. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. The next week, Diane's daughter came to visit. Her name was Rachel, and she was 28, a kindergarten teacher from Virginia with bright eyes and an easy laugh. She was nervous about meeting me. I could tell, but I put her at ease right away. So you're the famous Morgan, she said, shaking my hand. Famous? Mom talks about you all the time. She says you're a hero. I felt my face flush. I'm not a hero. I just did my job. That's what heroes always say. We spent the afternoon at the lake, the four of us. Dad and Diane sat on the dock, their feet dangling in the water. Rachel and I swam, diving under and surfacing, laughing like kids. It felt easy, natural, like we'd known each other longer than an afternoon. Later, while Dad and Diane were packing up the cooler, Rachel and I sat on the shore, watching the sun dip low over the water. I'm glad you're okay with this, Rachel said. With my mom and your dad. I wasn't at first, I admitted, but I am now. Mom was really worried about meeting you. She didn't want to mess things up. She didn't mess anything up. She made things better, Rachel smiled. Good, because she really loves him. And I haven't seen her this happy in years. My dad deserves to be happy, I said. And so does your mom, Rachel nodded. We're lucky, you know. A lot of people don't get second chances. Yeah, I said. We are. A few days before I had to leave, Dad and I drove out to the cemetery. We hadn't been there together since Mom's funeral. I'd visited once or twice on my own over the years, but it had always been quick, laying flowers, saying a few words, and leaving before the weight of it crushed me. This time was different. We stood in front of her grave, the headstone simple and clean, beloved wife and mother. Dad knelt down and brushed away some leaves that had gathered at the base. He pulled a small bouquet of wildflowers from behind his back, the kind Mom used to pick from the field behind our house. I brought these for her, he said quietly. I knelt beside him. She would have loved them. We sat there in silence for a while, the summer breeze rustling through the trees. Then Dad spoke. I talk to her sometimes. Is that weird? No, I said. I do too. I tell her about you. About what you're doing. About how proud I am. I tell her about Diane. I think she'd understand. She would, I said. She'd want you to be happy, Dad nodded, his eyes wet. I miss her every day, Morgan. Every single day. Me too. He put his arm around me, and we sat there together. Two people trying to hold on to someone who was gone while learning how to let go at the same time. I'm sorry I wasn't here, I said, after she died. I should have stayed. You did what you needed to do, Dad said. And you came back. That's what matters. I'm going to keep coming back, I promised. I'm not disappearing again. Good, he said, because I need you, kid. I always have. On my last night, we had a cookout in the backyard. Dad grilled burgers and hot dogs. Diane made her famous coleslaw. Rachel drove down from Virginia again, and we invited a few of Dad's friends from work and some neighbors. It was loud and chaotic and full of life, the kind of gathering Mom would have loved. I stood by the grill, watching everyone laugh and talk and eat. Watching Dad flip burgers with a spatula in one hand and a beer in the other. Watching Diane move through the crowd, making sure everyone had enough to eat. Watching Rachel play cornhole with one of the neighbor kids. This was home. Not the house. Not the place. The people. The love. The mess of it all. Later, after everyone had gone home and the yard was quiet again, Dad and I sat on the porch one last time. I'm really glad you came, he said. Me too. When will you be back? Thanksgiving. If I can swing it. Christmas for sure. I'll hold you to that. I know you will. He looked at me, his face soft in the porch light. I love you, Morgan. More than anything. I love you too, Dad. We sat there until the stars came out, not saying much, just being together. And when I finally went inside to pack, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt whole. The flight back to Texas was long, but I didn't mind. I had 3 weeks of memories to replay in my head. 3 weeks of laughter and conversations and moments I'd carry with me no matter where the army sent me next. And when I landed, when I put my uniform back on and reported for duty, I felt different, lighter, like I'd finally let go of something I'd been carrying for too long. I called Dad that night. Made it back safe. I said, good. We already miss you. I miss you too, but I'll be home soon. I know you will. And I would. Because home wasn't something I was running from anymore. It was something I was running toward.